The Bank of Canada finally lowered the interest rate, and it's about time. I know what you're thinking, home prices will go up and buyers will get back into the market. And while this could be the case, it doesn't happen right away. The last time the Bank of Canada held the key interest rate for a long period of time was back in October 2018. The rate went up 5 times and held at 1.75% for 16 straight months. The bank finally started the rate drops in March 2020. The following month in April 2020, Toronto property sales transactions were 3,000 for the month. The average price was $821,000. That kind of price is extremely low compared to prices today, and that was just 4 years ago. Yet during that time, the overall sentiment was that prices were high. Ring a bell? People are saying the exact same thing today about Toronto home prices. And it's not wrong, prices are high, but just remember where prices are probably heading. Just one more month later in May 2020, Toronto property sales went up to 4,600 transactions. That's an increase of 53% in just 2 months after the key interest rate started to drop. There was a lot of pent-up demand coming out of the slower real estate market after the pandemic. And coming out of the pandemic had buyers and sellers ready to get back into the market. You can almost say that they were anxious for their own reasons. It was almost like everyone was done waiting around and was itching to make a move. And this ended up pushing home prices up 5% to an average price of $863,000. But there's a reason why we might actually not see home prices rise this quickly, even though we're somewhat in a similar situation with the key interest rate being held for a long period of time. The difference right now is that there is no pandemic. There is no global pause on the economy. The pent-up demand wouldn't be similar to what we saw coming out of the pandemic, but still similar in the sense that people are waiting for the rate to drop. And when it does, people get better mortgage rates, better loans, and have more disposable income to invest and buy random things. Buyers speculate that a rate drop would be a good indication to get back into the market because their borrowing costs from their lender would be less. This is true, but a rate reduction of just 25 basis points can only help so much. But sure, every dollar counts, but amortized over 25 or 30 years, the interest paid over that time is like comparing apples to apples. And now for potential home sellers on the sidelines, the truth is that they're always going to have the upper hand with low inventory. And so getting back into the market now with the potential to reach more buyers would be at their advantage because more buyers often results in higher home prices. And based on history, it doesn't take a long time for home prices to go up. Just 3 months after the key interest rate started to go down, sales almost doubled with 8,700 transactions. The average price went up another 8% to $930,000. So in 2020, between April and June, home prices went up $110,000. And in any other circumstance where home values went up this much in such a short period of time, the Bank of Canada would intervene and slow things down. But instead, this is exactly what was wanted as a desired outcome. Home prices had to go up and spending on real estate was encouraged in order to reinvigorate the economy. And they let this happen for 2 whole years until March 2022, when the key interest rate started to go up again to where it is today. And by that time, during those 2 years, home prices went up 40% to an average of $1.3 million. That's like saying every month for 2 years, home prices went up 2%. It almost doesn't make any sense why the Bank of Canada let this happen for so long. Coming out of the pandemic, it made sense, but 2 years of consistent rising home prices were left alone. And now even today with home prices at an average of nearly $1.2 million, it makes me wonder how high home prices will go, especially now that the key interest rate is starting to trend down. And how long will it take before home prices reach a new all-time high in Toronto? If the Bank of Canada lets this sit again for another 24 months, I don't think we'll see a 40% increase in home prices. I really hope that doesn't happen, because if it does, we could see the average home price in Toronto at $1.6 million before the end of 2026. And yet some people wonder why Toronto home prices keep going up. It isn't because the land value is there or that sellers and buyers are directly influencing the real estate market with bidding wars. Land value and competition for real estate will always be there, but the influence the Bank of Canada has on the property market is what ultimately dictates how low or high home prices can go. If they keep the rates up, it brings down the competition, which is another way of saying that buyers have been pushed out of the market. But as soon as 3 months after the key interest rate begins to drop, home prices will start going up. And this would bring us to the fall market in September this year. By then, another 2 rate announcements will take place in July and September, and another 2 more interest rate decisions in October and December before the end of the year. If the trend continues with rate drops of 25 basis points, which is possible, then I think it's definitely in the realm of possibilities that the Toronto real estate market will see home prices exceed anything we've seen before in the last couple of years. But it's not all doom and gloom, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone out there who's trying to make a move. This is just simply what I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years in the real estate market, and has a possibility of repeating it, and has a possibility of repeating if history repeats itself, which it tends to do. I guess I'm not too surprised that the current market is more or less balanced. There's a decent decent amount of inventory available. Sales are at 7,000 transactions per month, which have been going up month over month. Prices are too high, and I hear this all the time, but at an average price of $1.15 million, that's still lower than what it was a few years ago. The key difference is that mortgage rates are relatively high still, but that's going to change. Once we start seeing a change in mortgage rates with borrowers getting rates lower than what they could have gotten just a month ago, there's a psychological effect that tells people that they're getting a deal because their dollar stretches just a bit more, so it's time to make a move. 3 months of this sort of behavior and we'll see the fall market less balanced out and likely leaning more towards sellers. As home prices go up, rates go down, and competition rises. To further put this in perspective, we could see something like 1 house for every 5 buyers in Toronto. And don't take this as a fear of missing out message. It's more like if you're watching the market and trying to time things so you can make a decision of when to step into the market, then here's another piece of information you can use or not use to make your own judgments. And at the end of the day, no one can predict what's going to happen in 3 months or even by the end of the year. The Bank of Canada considers many factors before dropping the key interest rate. That includes inflation, and right now, the Bank of Canada indicated that it expects inflation to reach its target of 2% in 2025. If it reaches that target, then I see no reason why further rate drops next year would not be possible. But do I expect the key interest rate to drop back to 0.25% like it was coming out of the pandemic? Probably not. The economy experienced a massive shock with the world basically shutting down, so it made sense to lower the key interest rate to nearly nothing so that it would encourage spending again. Real estate started to bounce back, people started traveling, all of the above. That's when the world went back to normal. I remember when words like pandemic, self-isolation, and quarantine were the top words coming out of everyone's mouths. Now, we don't even hear those words anymore. All we hear is rate drop, and that's starting to happen now, as we've seen with the latest announcement from the Bank of Canada. 90,000 new jobs were added in April, and that's one reason the bank will consider when they're deciding whether to lower, increase, or maintain the key interest rate. And in the case when job growth is clearly there, then it's a valid reason for the bank to lower the rate. Just don't expect the real estate market to go crazy right after one rate drop, especially at a mere 25 basis points. I think a lot of potential home sellers are itching to list their homes for sale, but they're waiting for the right time when more buyers are in the market. It's like the other side of the mirror, because on the other side, there are a bunch of buyers who are also waiting to get back into the market, waiting for the rates to drop. It's like everyone's just waiting on the sidelines, and when one side makes a move, the other side reacts, and some people think this is a good thing, including the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, Tim Hudak. He says that the Bank of Canada needs to lower interest rates now to help people find a place to call home, encourage more building, and address the cost of living crisis. He also says that Canadians need lower rates now. We've been living in this higher than what we're used to interest rate environment now for a year, and technically longer since the key interest rate went up another year before that. So I agree that a rate drop needs to happen so that Canadians aren't suffering anymore, but at the same time, I also understand the bank's position where they don't want inflation to get out of hand again. He also mentions that the majority of Canadian homeowners opt for fixed rate mortgages, with 5-year terms being the most common. A family refinancing in June 2024 has been paying an interest rate from 2019 and will suddenly have hundreds of dollars a month less available in a family budget that was already tough to balance. Realistically, it's probably more like thousands of dollars less, not hundreds. The average employee isn't going to suddenly come up with that kind of money every month unless their life dramatically changes with a new job with a much higher salary. And also, the same family would have seen the impacts of higher interest rates and the effects on everyone else around them as they sat back with their fixed mortgage rate of maybe 2% that they got from 5 years ago. So I can't really say it's a shock to them, because over the last 2 years, they should have seen this coming, and so to not be prepared for this is also somewhat their fault, only from the perspective of a lack of budgeting and a lack of taking action to be prepared for this. Let's say if you saw a train coming straight at you, I don't think most people would just stand there. They'd get out of the way so they can avoid getting hit by the train. And yes, mortgage rate shock is the train in this example. As for those who need to refinance, the report goes on to say that refinancing costs are hitting more families every month. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation estimated that 45% of all mortgages are up for renewal in 2024 or 2025. But by 2025, the Bank of Canada expects inflation to hit the target of 2%. And at that same time, the key interest rate will likely be lower than what it is today. This also means that home prices will be higher than what we're used to today. So although the renewal rates will be favorable for those renewing at that time, the purchase prices will be much higher for those purchasing next year, regardless of what the mortgage rates are. This June meeting and the Bank of Canada's decision to drop the rate is meant to give a preview of what's likely to happen throughout the rest of the year. There are still 4 more interest rate announcements to be made before the end of the year, which makes way for the potential for more rate drops before we get into 2025. In July, I think we could see another rate drop when the bank has a new monetary policy report with revised forecasts for inflation and economic growth. Giving Canadians a preview of what will come in July gives us an idea of how to start planning and timing things when we're in a low interest rate environment. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like and subscribe. I'm posting new videos all the time so that I can help you reach your real estate goals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.